A month. It took me a month to find you. Why the hell did you disappear? Again, I'm asking you questions like I expect any answers. And now we're in Iowa. Or at least a fictional version of Iowa. I hate Iowa. Well, I hate fictional version. I hate the music, man. That's what I'm saying. So, where the hell is it? What are we doing here? I assume there's another one here somewhere. Well?
It's the biggest night of the year.
Goblin boogie boogie.
Baby, Halloween is here.
Okay, before we move on, I want to clear up a long-standing misconception about Scooby-Doo as a franchise. Back in 1998, when Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island came out, a lot of people, especially those who hadn't actually watched Scooby-Doo in years, complained that Scooby-Doo had never had real monsters in its entire run. Some responded by pointing at the 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo and the 3 Superstar 10 movies, and more or less claiming real monsters had been a thing in the franchise since 1985. Both of these assumptions are incorrect. Real monsters have been in various incarnations of the franchise since 1980, with the second season of Scooby-Doo and Scrappy-Doo. As mentioned in the first video in this series, the second and third season of Scooby-Doo and Scrappy-Doo, packaged in an hour-long block with other shows, went from one 30-minute mystery to 3 7-minute adventures featuring real monsters and magic and so on. These tend to get overlooked by most casual fans of the franchise, largely because 1, they're not that great, 2, they're not readily available, and 3, they're pretty much the peak Scrappy-centric period. So why bring this up now? Well, this is because the next movie in the series doesn't resemble classic Scooby-Doo so much as second or third season Scooby-Doo and Scrappy-Doo, minus Scrappy. Scooby-Doo and the Goblin King was released on September 23, 2008, and this time Joe Sykda flew solo on the writing, producing, and directing fronts. The movie opens with the gang having fun at a Halloween carnival. Yes, even Shaggy and Scooby, when you would think this would be the kind of place they'd hate.
Like Halloween is the one night when you know everything is fake. Just take a look around.
The gang decide to see a performance by the carnival's magician, the amazing Krudsky, voiced by Wayne Knight. However, because Scooby soaked him while goofing around bobbing for apples, Krudsky bans Scooby from the show. And this gives Shaggy an idea.
Like, what do you say we get in on the act?
The boys then proceed to undermine every trick Krudsky tries to do, which for some reason angers the crowd.
Like the amazing Krudsky is just a make-believe magician.
Why are they booing Krudsky? I mean, he's a stage magician. Anyone attending this kind of show knows they're being tricked. Half the fun is seeing the illusions work. No one really likes knowing how they're done unless they want to try doing it themselves. If anything, the crowd should be booing Scooby and Shaggy. And apparently, somebody in carnival management agreed because the gang gets kicked out and decides, for the sheer hell of it apparently, to go trick-or-treating. As Shaggy and Scooby hit one more house, the rest of the gang go get the van. And here's where the film veers right off the rails of formula. Back at the carnival, Krudsky monologues about how he's been searching for real magic, and thanks to the fairy, yes, actual fairy we just met, he finds a lead.
The Goblin Scepter, fabled wand of the great Goblin King.
The fairy, named Princess Willow, as we find out later and voiced by Hayden Panettiere, decides to have some fun with Krudsky, but it backfires on her, and using a spell in one of his books, Krudsky manages to steal her magic. The last house Shaggy and Scooby visit is a rambling mansion with a sign on the gate indicating it's Mr. Gibble's Genuine Magic Shop. They meet the proprietor, the eponymous Mr. Gibble, voiced by Wallace Shawn, who starts a musical number. No, I'm not kidding.
You never know who's at the door on Halloween night. Spirits from the shadows creeping into the light.
Yeah. Moving on. Willow shows up looking for help, followed by Krudsky. With the magic he's stolen, he manages to capture Willow and turn Gibble into a rabbit. He steals a bunch of stuff from the store and flies off. Shaggy and Scooby naturally are ready to check right the hell out of this story, but Gibble shows them what will happen if Krudsky keeps going unopposed. Naturally, this gives the boys the incentive to actually go on the quest they've been given. And the quest in question?
You must travel to the land of the Halloween spirits. There you will see the hidden castle of the great Goblin King. Sneak into the castle undetected, grab the Goblin scepter, and make your escape before the stroke of midnight.
Gibble gives the boys a deck of magic cards with a variety of effects, the first of which is to make them look like monsters so they can fit in better on the other side. And then a train from hell shows up. So, with a warning to be back by sunrise or be trapped in the spirit world forever, the boys head off, panic when the train starts flying, hit the emergency brake, get off the train in the spirit world, encounter a werewolf, engage in some cheap subterfuge, and find themselves in the Halloween equivalent of the Mos Eisley Cantina. And after bringing the next obligatory not very good song to a close by asking how to get to the Goblin King's castle, we then wind up with this movie's totally not a complete cliché alleged comedy hench duo, Glob and Glum, voiced by Jim Belushi and Larry Joe Campbell.
No one dares speak of the Goblin King. Ow! What'd you do that for?
You said Goblin King.
The boys are saved by Jack O'Lantern, a literal living jack-o'-lantern voiced by Jay Leno. And yeah, it's just as unbearable as you might think.
You guys are whack! I love it!
Shut up, Leno.
However, Jack just happens to belong to the Headless Horseman and asks for the boys' help in getting away from him. This starts another chase, which surprisingly doesn't have music going at the same time. It also gives us a chance to prove that the cards are primarily going to be used for cheap gags and no practical use.
Clown calamity! Baby on a frog!
Back at the carnival, Fred, Velma, and Daphne are looking for the boys. They spot a strange light coming from Krudsky's tent and find him talking via magic mirror to the Goblin King, voiced once again by Tim motherfucking Curry! Krudsky shows the Goblin King that he has Willow as his prisoner, which causes Daphne to realize that, yes, the supernatural is real. This revelation, however, has an adverse effect on Velma.
Rational mind. Shutting down.
And here we are! The exact point where Velma takes over as the unable-to-be-convinced skeptic no matter what in this franchise. This is where it starts, but it's going to get worse as time goes on, which we will talk about later. The Goblin King reluctantly agrees to Krudsky's offer of trading Willow for the Goblin Scepter, planning to meet Krudsky at the clock tower at midnight. And what will Krudsky do with his newfound power?
And then I'll show that scruffy slacker and his main-game mutt Scooby-Doo a magic trick they'll never forget.
Yeah, petty vengeance for Shaggy and Scooby undermining his show. This is what we call disproportionate response, as well as petty as hell. Anyway, Fred and Daphne, having no problems believing what they're seeing, decide to head to the clock tower to stop Krudsky from getting revenge and rescue Willow. Back in the spirit world, Jack leads Shaggy and Scooby to a trio of witches that can point them in the direction of the Goblin King's castle. Oh yeah, and Jack slaps us all in the face with the theme of the movie.
And everybody knows courage is the most powerful magic of all.
The boys head into the shack and, after some magical shenanigans, meet the witches, voiced by Rusty Taylor, Grey Delisle Griffin, and Lauren Bacall. Wait, Lauren Bacall?
There are bad omens everywhere tonight. Some dark force has upset the supernatural balance.
Yep, That Lauren Bacall, Hollywood legend, former wife of Humphrey Bogart, and generally just one hell of a great actress. Props to the casting department on this one. In exchange for directions, the boys take the Grand Witch's broomstick out, as Krudsky's interference with the magical order has forced her to cancel her usual midnight ride. The other witches also offer some help, and a pretty funny cutaway gag as well.
Made from scratch. Poor old Scratch.
Unfortunately, Glob and Glum spot them in flight and manage to shoot them down, causing them to crash into the forest. They come to in the City of the Fairies, where they get some help in repairing the broom. They also explain what they're doing.
If we can catch a lift to the Goblin Castle, we may be able to stop it.
We can show you the way, but you'll never get inside. The castle will be crawling with guards for the Goblin's reign.
The fairies show the boys the way to the Goblin's graveyard and the way to the castle. After taking the express coffin all the way down, the boys drink the potion given to them by the witches, which gives them a disguise. Sort of. You know, I'm a crossdresser, and honestly, I'm not sure whether to be offended at the joke or jealous of how the boys look in these outfits, because honestly, Shaggy is rocking Daphne's look. The goblins obviously like what they see because they let them into the party. They spot the Goblin King and the scepter, but get shanghaied into another musical number.
Where wrong is right and shall it say. We sleep all day and dance all night.
During the dancing, Scooby manages to get to the scepter, but the disguise slips, and the boys make a break for it, but fail to escape. Midnight comes, and the goblins are sent out to cause mischief, and Scooby and Shaggy are sent to the Tower Dungeon, if that isn't an oxymoron, and the Goblin King goes to meet with Krudsky. However, unknown to both of them, Fred and Daphne are also there, ready to spring the trap, which they do in the middle of the exchange. Unfortunately, the trap doesn't work, as expected, and while Fred manages to rescue Willow, the Goblin King winds up in the trap, and Krudsky gets the scepter.
The amazing Krudsky! Version 2.0!
Krudsky turns the Goblin King into a goose, and Fred and Daphne make a run for it with Willow. Meanwhile, back at the Tower Dungeon, we get slapped in the face again with the theme of the movie.
That took courage, stamina, brains, and those are things we don't have.
Fortunately, the fairies arrive and get them out of the dungeon. The boys are reunited with the Broom and Jack and head off, determined to save the day. Back in Coolsville, Krudsky decides to have a little fun by turning the Mystery Machine into a Big Daddy Roth nightmare, which doesn't make Fred very happy.
Whoa. Now that is something you just do not do to a guy's van.
The van chases the three back into the carnival, and hey, look at that! Scrappy actually is in this movie. Eventually, they get trapped on the Ferris wheel, and Krudsky turns them into monsters, as we saw at the beginning of the film. Fortunately, the boys show up. Scooby hurls Jack at Krudsky, Jack explodes, sending the crazed magician for a loop, and dropping the scepter. Scooby manages to grab it with the accompanying transformation, and Krudsky uses a poor choice of words.
Let me have it!
Which is just what Scooby does, stripping Krudsky of his powers, freeing Willow, and undoing all the transformations. Yes, all of them.
Trick or treat.
As it turns out, Willow is actually the Goblin King's daughter, and all this happened because she snuck out of the spirit world early for Halloween.
As of now, you are officially grounded for 1 year. But I'm awfully glad to have you back.
And so the Goblin King reopens the portal back to the spirit world, sending the other goblins through and revives Jack. However, there's a catch.
You shall indeed remember, but all others must forget.
The Goblin King leaves, taking Krudsky with him, and as dawn breaks, sure enough, Fred, Velma, and Daphne forget about everything that just happened. Get used to this, by the way. Even beyond the What's New era, this kind of thing is going to keep on happening. As the carnival closes down, the gang wonder if maybe they aren't getting too old for Halloween, and Shaggy decides to hit us with the movie's theme one last time.
You never know where your next scare is going to come from. You've just got to find the courage to deal with it face to face.
I hesitate to call Scooby-Doo and the Goblin King bad, because for the most part, it does fire on all cylinders. It's decently paced, there's some creative animation, and the voice work is impeccable. In fact, I'd go so far as to consider this tied for best What's New era movie alongside Where's My Mummy? It's just, like I said, it doesn't really feel like a Scooby-Doo movie. There's no mystery involved, it's just, here's the problem, Shaggy and Scooby are chosen to deal with that problem, and they do. The rest of the gang are incidental to the story, and it feels like Sikta had no real idea what to do with them. Velma is outright sidelined for most of the movie, and yeah, it feels like an extended second or third season Scooby-Doo and Scrappy-Doo episode. Overall, though, I'd say the positives outweigh the negatives. If I'm right, this should be appearing online about a month or so before Halloween, so if you're looking for some light Halloween viewing, throw this on and enjoy yourself. It may not follow formula, but it's certainly one of the more entertaining Scooby ventures. And with that, we blow out the candle on another of the 30-plus films of Scooby-Doo.
Scooby-Dooby-Doo!
Okay then. Which way now? Not that way.
Here come those meddling kids to join the chase. No creep can keep them away.